Marcus Bell was 37 years old, and for 9 years he had been a man his wife. Simone introduced as my husband. He does something with computers. He drove a 2016 Ford Fusion with 140,000 miles on it. He wore polo shirts from Target and kept his hair cut short by a barber on Beatty's Ford Road who charged him $15 and called him son. He carried a Walmart wallet with 2 credit cards and a folded photo of his late mother. Her friends in Charlotte called him Steady. Marcus, the IT guy, the one who fixed their laptops at Christmas. She never corrected them. On a rainy Sunday evening in February, she stood in the doorway of the bedroom they had shared since 2016, suitcase already packed and waiting in the hall, and told him in a voice that had been rehearsed in front of 3 different mirrors that she was leaving. He set down the book he had been reading. He looked at her. She said the sentence she had been waiting 9 years to say. I don't need you, Marcus. I never did. I just got comfortable. She told him she was moving in with a man named Terrence Vaughn, a regional vice president at a marketing firm uptown who drove a white Range Rover and had been promising her for 14 months the life she felt she deserved. She told him the divorce papers would come through her attorney by Friday. She told him to keep the house because she would not need it. She walked out the front door at 7:48 in the evening and did not look back. $94,000 from their joint checking account walked out with her in the form of a cashier's check she had drawn that morning. What Simone never thought to ask, not in 9 years of marriage, was what kind of company a quiet man worked for when he left the house at 6:30 every morning and came home at 6:30 every evening, or why a man who fixed her sister's printer for free had a private accountant in Atlanta who called him sir. 3 months later, she would stand on his porch in the rain, with mascara running down her face, and beg to be let back in. He would open the door. He would not let her in. What he said on that porch was the only thing she would remember about him for the rest of her life. Before we jump into the story, comment where on the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning after she left, the rain had stopped and the air through the kitchen window of the small ranch house on West Overdrive smelled like wet pine and turned earth, and Marcus Bell stood at the counter in a flannel shirt and gray sweatpants and poured coffee from a percolator his mother had bought him for his college graduation in 2009. The percolator was older than his marriage. The percolator had outlasted a lot of things. He carried the cup to the kitchen table he had refinished himself 2 summers back, set it down on the coaster Simone had always complained he forgot to use, and sat in the morning, quiet, and listened to his own breathing. His phone was face down on the table. It had not rung. He had not expected it. 2. His mother had passed in 2020 from a stroke that took her in her sleep at the age of 63, and the last conversation he had ever had with her had been about Simone, about the small ways Simone had begun to look through him at family dinners, about the kind of distance a woman opens up in a marriage when she has already decided what she wants next. His mother had said in the voice she used when she did not want to argue with him, but also did not want him to forget, baby, a woman who needs to remind herself she is better than you is. A woman who already left. You just haven't seen the door close yet. He had laughed at her. He had told her she did not understand. He understood now. On the bookshelf in the living room, between a hardback history of the Tuskegee Airmen and a worn copy of The Souls of Black Folk, there was a small wooden box his uncle Reuben had carved for him when he turned 12. Inside the box were 3 things Simone had never asked about: a flash drive, a business card with no logo on it, and a single key on a brass ring. She had walked past that box every day for 9 years and never once opened it, because Simone did not open things that did not announce themselves as important. She mistook quiet for empty. A lot of people did. He had met Simone in the summer of 2015 at a wedding reception in Greensboro, where she had been a bridesmaid, and he had been the only black man at the bar who was not in the wedding party. She had walked up to him in a dress the color of champagne and asked him what he did for a living, and he had told her, truthfully, that he was a software engineer. She had heard engineer and decided he must be ordinary, because she had grown up around men who used the word engineer to mean I work in a cubicle and bring home a steady paycheck. She had never asked him to elaborate. He had not offered. He had liked her laugh and the way she touched his arm and the soft, uncomplicated things she seemed to want from him. And he had married her 13 months later in a small ceremony at her aunt's church in Durham. He had not invited his accountant. He had not invited the two men from Atlanta who had once been his business partners. He had kept his life with her separate from his life before her because she had never asked to see the rest of it. And a man who has built something quietly is not in the business of explaining himself to people who have not asked. He drank his coffee. He looked at the clock above the stove. It read 7:14. He picked up his phone, opened a contact he had not used in 11 months, and sent a single text. Larry, I need to come down to the office on Wednesday. We have things to discuss. The response came back inside of 40 seconds. Yes, sir, Mr. Bell. The conference room will be ready. He set the phone down. The house was very quiet. The percolator clicked once as it cooled. Tools were meant to work, not shine, his uncle Reuben had told him once, sanding the wooden box on a porch in South Carolina. 40 years before he ever knew Marcus would need to remember it. He stood up and washed his cup and put it on the drying rack and went to get dressed. The discovery did not happen all at once. The discovery happened in the way Marcus had always done things, which was patiently, with documentation, in the same way a man reads a flawed contract, by going through every line until he finds the clause that explains why the whole thing is rotten. He spent Clear's throat that first Monday morning at his kitchen table with his laptop open and the wooden box beside him, and went through every joint account they had ever shared. The $94,000 cashier's check was the loud number. The loud number was almost never the real number. The real number lived in the small ones, the ones a person hopes nobody is counting. He found a $1,200 monthly recurring transfer that had been moving from their joint savings to an account at a regional credit union since the previous April. 10 months, $12,000. He pulled the statements from the credit card she used for groceries and household expenses and noticed that the household expenses had begun to include charges at boutique hotels in Asheville and Charleston. 4 nights here, 3 nights there, always on weekends. She had told him she was attending women's retreats with her sister. Her sister had not, he confirmed with a single phone call to a cousin in Winston-Salem, attended at any retreats. He noted it. He did not call the sister. He did not call Simone. He saved every statement to a folder on the flash drive from the wooden box. He labeled the folder reference. He kept finding things. He found a personal loan she had taken out in October against a car that was titled in both their names, $18,000. The funds deposited into the same regional credit union account. He found a credit card in her name only with a balance of $26,000. The charges concentrated at 3 Jewelers, a luxury luggage store, and a high-end salon on Selwyn Avenue. He had paid the minimum on that card himself, automatically for the last 6 months, because the auto pay had been linked to his personal account, and he had assumed it was a card they shared. It was not. She had used his money to pay the bill on a card he was not authorized to use. He photographed the statements. He saved them. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. He had learned a long time ago in a different chapter of his life that anger was a current that ran underneath the work, and that the work was what mattered. Anger by itself accomplished nothing. Anger directed by patience accomplished everything. By Wednesday morning, he had a 41-page binder. He drove to Atlanta in a Fusion, took I-85 south through the slow gray light of a February dawn, and at 11:30, he pulled into the underground garage of a 6-story office building in Buckhead that had his name on the deed and the names of 2 other men on the operating agreement. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. The receptionist stood up when he walked in. "Mr. Bell, it's been a while." He nodded at her. "It has, Yolanda. How's your boy? Starting middle school. In the fall. Tell him I said keep his head in the books." He walked past her into a conference room where a man named Larry Whitfield, 68 years old, gray-bearded, wearing a navy 3-piece suit, stood up from a leather chair and shook his hand the way men shake hands when they have known each other for 15 years and survived things together. Larry had been Marcus's accountant since 2011, the year a quiet little software company Marcus had built in his apartment as a side project had been acquired by a defense contractor for $14.6 million, half of which had gone to his 2 co-founders and half of which had gone through a careful trust structure Larry had designed to Marcus. He had never spent the money. He had let Larry invest it. He had let it grow quietly for 15 years while he wore polo shirts from Target and drove a Ford Fusion and let his wife introduce him as the man who did something with computers. Larry sat down across from him. Marcus put the binder on the table. Larry opened it. Larry read for 8 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up. He said, "Marcus, what do you want to do?" Marcus said, "I want to be free of her, and I want her to be clean, and I do not want to hurt her any more than she has hurt herself." Larry nodded. Slowly. "She has touched none of the trust assets," Marcus said. "She does not know they exist." Larry said, "Good. Then this is simple. We file in North Carolina. The marital estate is the house, the joint accounts, the cars, and the credit card debt. The $94,000 she took will be characterized as marital property she dissipated. We recover it through the settlement. The debt she ran up on the card you were not authorized to use is hers. The personal loan she took without your signature is hers. We will not contest custody because there are no children. We will not contest the house because the house is in your name only from before the marriage. This will be over in 4 months." Marcus said, "Make it 3. Larry smiled slowly, the way old men smile when they remember what a young man is capable of. 3, it is." He drove back to Charlotte that evening. He stopped at a diner outside Greenville and ate a plate of catfish and grits and read a paperback he had been carrying in the glove compartment for 2 months. He thought about his mother. He thought about the way she had always told him not to let bitterness take root, because bitterness was a kind of rent you paid to people who no longer lived in your house. He paid the check. He drove home. The house on Westover Drive was dark. He turned on the porch light and the kitchen light and sat at the table and opened his laptop and began to write the email that would in 3 days time be served on Simone Bell through her attorney, along with a copy of the binder. He did not send it that night. He let it sit. Preparation is the work. Everything else is just patience. 3 weeks into the process, Larry called him on a Thursday afternoon with information that did not surprise his mother. Terrence Vaughn, the regional vice president at the marketing firm Uptown, was not a regional vice president. Terrence Vaughn was a mid-level account manager who had been put on a performance improvement plan in November and terminated in early February, 2 weeks before Simone had left her husband to move into his South Park condo. He had told her he was on sabbatical. He had told her his bonus would come through in March. He had been living, Larry's investigator confirmed, on a home equity line of credit and an increasingly thin margin of 2 credit cards. The white Range Rover was leased The condo lease was up for renewal in May. He had not told Simone any of this. Marcus listened. He thanked Larry. He hung up. He did not feel triumph. He felt the slow, sober recognition a man feels when he sees a structure he had suspected was hollow finally begin to creak. He went out to the small workshop behind the house where he kept his Uncle Reuben's old tools and sanded the lid of a jewelry box he had been making for a cousin's daughter's graduation. The wood smelled like cedar. The smell was the same smell that had filled his uncle's porch on summer afternoons in 1991. Some things did not change. Some things you could trust. In early April, Larry called again. Terrence had been evicted from a South Park condo on the 1st. Simone had paid the last 2 months of his rent out of the $94,000 cashier's check. Of that $94,000, Larry's investigator had traced there was approximately $19,000 left. The rest had gone to rent, to a designer handbag, to a dinner at a restaurant on the lake that had cost $840, to a trip to Miami in mid-March that had ended in an argument loud enough for the hotel to ask them to check out a day early. Terrence had left her. Terrence had moved back in with his mother in Rock Hill on the 2nd of April. Simone was alone in a short-term rental in Plaza Midwood that she had taken on a month-to-month lease because the divorce filings had frozen her ability to qualify for anything longer. She had been calling her sister every night. Her sister had stopped picking up. Her mother, Larry's investigator had learned through a clerk at her mother's church, had told 2 friends at Sunday service that she did not know what had gotten into her daughter and that good man, Marcus, had not deserved any of it. Marcus listened. He thanked Larry. He hung up. He went outside and watered the small herb garden he had planted in March and thought about nothing in particular. She came to the door on the 3rd, Saturday in May at 9:14 in the evening, in the rain, with her hair flat against her forehead and her makeup running, and a purse clutched her chest like a thing she was afraid to put down. The doorbell rang. Marcus had been reading in the living room. He set the book on the arm of the chair. He walked to the door. He looked through the small window beside it and saw her standing on the porch he had repainted. In March, under the light, he had replaced. In April, and for a long second he did not move. He thought about his mother. He thought about Larry. He thought about the wooden box on the bookshelf and what was inside it, and what she had walked past for 9 years without ever knowing was there. He opened the door. He did not open the screen. She said, "Marcus." Her voice broke on his name. "Marcus, please." He looked at her through the screen. He did not speak. She said, "I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. He's gone. He took everything. I have nothing. I have no one. Marcus, please. I am asking you, please let me come inside and just talk to you. Just talk." She was crying now openly, the way a person cries when they have run out of versions of themselves to perform. "I know what I said. I know what I did. I have thought about you every day. Every single day. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please." Marcus waited. He let the silence sit between them on the porch. The rain came down soft on the eaves. A car passed on Westover Drive, and the headlights swept across the wet pavement and were gone. He thought for one moment about the woman she had been at 26 in a champagne-colored dress, and he honored that woman by being honest now with the one in front of him. He said, "Simone." She looked up. He said, "You told me you did not need me. You were right. You did not. You needed someone who could pay for what you wanted to perform, and when he could not, you came back to the man you mistook for a wallet you had already emptied. I am not angry with you. I want you to hear that. I'm not angry. I am clear. There is a difference." He paused. The rain ticked on the porch roof. "You walked past who I was for 9 years because you decided I was simple, and you decided you were better, and neither of those things turn out to be true. I do not say that to hurt you. I say it because you came here tonight to tell me you made a mistake, and the mistake you actually made is the one you still do. Now understand, the mistake was not Terrence. The mistake was that you spent 9 years married to a man you never bothered to know. I knew you. I saw every inch of you, and I stayed anyway. Until you told me to go. He breathed in once slowly. Go home, Simone. Wherever. Home is now. You will not be coming into this house tonight or any other night. I wish you well. I mean that, but I wish you well at a distance. The door is closed. He stepped back. He closed the wooden door. He turned the deadbolt. He stood there in the entryway, with his hand on the frame, and listened to her crying on the other side of the door for 47 seconds. And then he heard her footsteps go down the porch steps. And then he heard the car door close. And then he heard the engine pull away into the rain. He walked back into the living room. He picked up his book. He sat down. He read. 6 months had passed like water. Marcus sat on the back porch of the house on Westover Drive on a clear, cool Saturday in November and watched the maple in the corner of the yard let its leaves go, one and then two, and then a slow handful into the grass he had cut. That morning, the herb garden had gone dormant for the winter. The deck boards he had replaced in September were still pale where the stain had not yet weathered in. On the small wooden table beside his chair sat a cup of coffee from the same percolator his mother had given him in 2009, and a paperback book and a letter from his cousin's daughter thanking him for the jewelry box he had finished and mailed in June. Inside the house, in the kitchen, a woman named Adez, a pediatric nurse from a hospital in Greensboro who had asked him careful questions on their third date about what he actually did for a living, and had listened, really listened, when he told her the long version was making a pot of stew her aunt had taught her to make. She had been coming up on weekends since September. She did not perform for him. She did not ask him for things. She laughed at the right places and was quiet at the right places. And last weekend, she had noticed the wooden box on the bookshelf and him. Simply, what's in there? He had told her. She had nodded. She had said, that makes sense. Simone lived now in a one-bedroom apartment in Gastonia. She worked at a call center for an insurance company. The divorce had finalized in late June, and Larry had executed every line of the plan he had laid out in February, and the $94,000 had been recovered through the settlement, and the credit card debt had been assigned to her, and the personal loan had been assigned to her, and she would be paying her former life back for the next 11 years. Her sister had eventually started taking her calls again, but only on Tuesdays and only for 15 minutes at a time. Terrence Vaughn had filed for personal bankruptcy in August. His name had appeared in a notice in the back of the Charlotte Observer that a former co-worker had texted to Larry, who had not forwarded it to Marcus because Marcus had asked him not to. Marcus did not need the news. Marcus had already moved on. He had used a portion of a trust to fund a scholarship at the high school in Salisbury, where his mother had taught math for 26 years. 2 students received it every year. He had received a handwritten letter from one of them the week before. He had folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden box on the bookshelf next to the flash drive and the business card and the brass key where it belonged. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the maple. He listened to a daze humming in the kitchen. He thought about his mother and about the porch in South Carolina where his Uncle Reuben had carved him the box, and about the long, quiet decade he had spent letting a woman walk past who he was without ever once asking him to slow down so she could see. He was free. He was solvent. He was loved by someone who had bothered to learn his name. He had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.